Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this special webinar hosted by Caritas Social Action Network, which works to develop the Church's social action in England and Wales and the Catholic Bishops' Conference of England and Wales. This webinar tonight precedes the 2023 World Day of Migrants and Refugees, a day of global significance that's been observed since 1914 within the Catholic Church. My name's Patrick O'Dowd, and I'm the Director of Caritas Diocese of Salford. I'm honoured to be the chair of CSAN's Migration Alliance, which works to network and support Catholic dioceses and agencies across England and Wales on programmes and advocacy. Together they work to support welcoming, protecting, promoting and integrating refugees and those seeking protection in our country. I'll also be chairing this evening's proceedings. This year, World Day of Migrants and Refugees falls on the 24th of September, though it's not just a date on the calendar. It's a special opportunity for us to stand as one, to raise our voices, to lend our hands and to open our hearts to those who have embarked on perilous journeys in search of safety, dignity and hope. It's a day when we, as a global community, come together to express our genuine concern for those who are most vulnerable amongst us, those who are on the move and often facing daunting challenges as they seek refuge and a better life. In his message for this year, Pope Francis has entitled it "Free to Choose Whether to Migrate or to Stay," and focused on the right of every person to choose whether to migrate or stay in their home country in full respect of their human dignity. These are the guiding principles that, inspired by Catholic social teaching, guide our daily commitment to communities and people on the move. Therefore, I'm very privileged to welcome our four important guest speakers for this webinar. Bishop Paul McAleenan is an auxiliary bishop in the Diocese of Westminster and the lead bishop for Migrants and Refugees in the Catholic Bishops' Conference of England and Wales. He'll be speaking about the Bishops' Conference document, Love the Stranger. We'll then hear from Andrea Marchesani from the Research Office of the Migrants and Refugees section of the Vatican Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, who'll be speaking in particular about the Pope's message for this year. We'll welcome Christine Allen, the Director of CAFOD, the Catholic International Development Charity, and the official overseas agency of the Catholic Church in England and Wales. And then later, we'll also hear from Chief Executive of CSAN, Raymond Friel, who'll be describing and talking about the Caritas Social Action Network's call to action. Each of our speakers will offer a reflection ahead of World Day of Migrants and Refugees on how we can build societies that embrace those seeking refuge and provide opportunities to allow people to thrive. We'll be discussing the right to migrate and how we can help people flourish in their homelands. We also will have some time this evening at the end for questions and answers to each of the speakers. So if you'd like, I encourage you throughout the course of the presentations to post questions using the question and answer facility at the bottom of your screen. Or if you'd like to make general observations or comments, these can be posted in the chat facility. The webinar will also be recorded and shared as a resource for those who can't join us tonight. We'll begin though with a prayer that's taken from Pope Francis' message for the 2023 World Day of Migrants and Refugees. Please join us in saying together this prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God, Father Almighty, grant us the grace to work tirelessly for justice, solidarity, and peace, so that all your children may enjoy the freedom to choose whether to migrate or to stay. Grant us the courage to denounce all the horrors of our world and to combat every injustice that mars the beauty of your children and the harmony of our common home. Sustain us by the power of your Spirit so that we can reflect your tender love to every migrant whom you place in our path, and to spread in our hearts and every situation the culture of encounter and of care. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our first speaker this evening is Bishop Paul McAleenan. Bishop Paul is auxiliary of Westminster and the lead bishop for Migrants and Refugees in the Bishops' Conference of England and Wales. Through his role, he's taken great steps to encounter and walk alongside migrants and refugees, both overseas and here in the UK. Bishop Paul was responsible for the recent document, Love the Stranger, a Catholic response to migrants and refugees, which draws on over a century of Catholic social teaching and applies it to the political and social situation we face today in England and Wales. Bishop Paul, I'm really pleased that you're here to be able to join us. Thank you very much and we'd like to hear from you now. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Patrick, for your introduction. And indeed, thank you to CSAN for arranging this webinar this evening. And thank you to everyone who is attending. And can I also thank you for whatever you are doing in your own parish, in your locality, for the cause of migrants and refugees. As Patrick said, I'm going to speak about the document, Love the Stranger. There's a wonderful Archbishop in Kurdistan, Iraq, called Archbishop Warda, who is leading the reconstruction project in that area. And Archbishop Warda said that buildings can be rebuilt, but restoring the dignity of those who are marginalized and humiliated is a far more difficult journey. It requires, he said, from interveners and aid providers, something beyond money. He went on to say that what is needed most of all is respect for people as human beings. The document, Love the Stranger, as Patrick said, is a response. But it is not a response to one particular incident or one particular piece of legislation. Instead, it is an affirmation, a declaration of something very, very basic: the innate worth of each human being. And that first and most fundamental of principles, applied specifically to migration, its causes and consequences, and how that same principle should guide, direct, and govern not only our response, but our thinking towards migration and towards migrants and refugees. Everything in the document is an expansion and a commentary on that first principle, the innate worth of each person, though it includes a call on government and people to acknowledge their responsibilities which flow from that principle. That the dignity of each person being respected and upheld is the concern of the whole document, no matter where that person is, in their own country or elsewhere. We are sometimes accused, in fact, often accused, of having an open door policy. Let everyone in. The Church and Love the Stranger does not take that approach. It is much more profound. It recognizes the global nature of migration, the resulting hardships which undermine and endanger human dignity, and presents a Catholic response based on Catholic social teaching and gospel values. In Love the Stranger, there are 24 principles. Following the 24 principles at the beginning, there are 8 chapters which progress, each chapter developing from the one before. And it begins with the global perspective, the whole world, universal belonging. One of the foundations of Catholic social teaching is universal belonging. The document received endorsement from the Dicastery for Integral Human Development. They were consulted beforehand. It has been received favorably by many Catholic charities and agencies. Will it have an effect? Well, this document, in which so much work was invested, will it have an effect? Will its purpose be achieved? And the answer is only if government take account of the global situation and are moved to work internationally and avoid policy which penalizes migrants and refugees and disregards their basic dignity. At the same time, we encourage use of the document so that what we say on migrant and refugee issues is heard and understood by the public at large. And it is edifying that many parishes are making use of it, and several charities and agencies are referring to it. The document Love the Stranger can be used for judging public policy concerning migrants and refugees. That public policy is consistently changing. In the last 3 years, we have seen the end of free movement from EU countries, the Rwanda Plan, the Illegal Migration Act, the Hong Kong BNO visa scheme, and Homes for Ukraine. Love the Stranger provides a framework for assessing such policies, to see, to judge, and to act. Government policy can be measured against the overarching principle. The right to migrate, is it being upheld? The common good, is it being properly considered? And there's a chapter devoted to equality and human dignity, which helps us to judge specifics such as, is decent accommodation being provided? Is family reunification being facilitated? Are our obligations under the Refugee Convention being honoured? Are unacceptable practices like detention and arbitrary removal being avoided? And with this approach, we can identify policies that are broadly deserving of our support. For example, the Hong Kong visa scheme. And we can identify policies which are incompatible with Catholic social teaching, such as the Rwanda Plan. Applying the principles of the document means engaging with practical issues, such as the aid budget, which has been slashed in recent years, the arms trade, which the UK plays a leading role in, and of course, the climate emergency, which we all share responsibility for. And these issues cannot be separated from those 4 wonderful verbs which Pope Francis has given us: welcome, promote, protect, and integrate migrants and refugees. Chapter 3 of the document, Love the Stranger, is entitled The Right to Flourish in One's Homeland, which corresponds to the theme of this year's World Day of Migrants and Refugees: free to choose, the right to migrate, and the right to stay. We didn't know at the time of publication that that was going to be the theme this year. And this issue, the right to choose, to migrate or to stay, was raised as long ago as 1891 by Pope Leo XIII. And he wrote in the first social encyclical, no one would exchange their own country for a foreign land if their own afforded them the means of a decent and happy life. Migration is not something new. This is reaffirmed by Pope Francis, who wrote, ideally, unnecessary migration ought to be avoided. This entails creating in countries of origin the conditions needed for a dignified life. In order to create those conditions, what is needed is solidarity, international cooperation, remembering another Catholic social teaching principle, the universal destination of goods. The fruits of the earth are for everyone. As Love the Stranger underscores, while we are called to engage with policymakers, responsibility for applying these principles does not only rest with the government. We all have a role to play, from helping people to flourish in their homelands to providing a dignified welcome when they come here. Much of this is undertaken by organizations, charities, and agencies such as CAFOD, Missio, Pax Christi, and Aid to the Church in Need. These agencies address the factors driving people from their homes in the first place. And there's Caritas, the Jesuit Refugee Service, and the St. Vincent de Paul Society, which provide practical support for people arriving here in the United Kingdom. The Chaldean Church in Kurdistan, Iraq, which I mentioned earlier, has so far, because of the aid they have received, built a wonderful library, a state-of-the-art hospital, and a university. It is attracting investment in the area to bring employment, to discourage young people from emigrating. And it is projects such as this which need to be supported. Yet, we very rarely hear of such efforts. I met some young people there who told me they had no intention of migrating. They were content. What they needed was being provided for. I have met several Ukrainians, and probably you have as well, who have fled the war in their homeland, who tell me that it is their intention to go home when hostilities cease. Everyone has the right to migrate, to seek fulfillment and security, economic and physical, for themselves and their families. But what is often overlooked is the right not to migrate. However, people do migrate, and we all know the reasons. Going to the aid of migrants, refugees, displaced persons, asylum seekers, is not simply almsgiving or an act of kindness, but it is an act of justice. Our solidarity with them comes from the basic belief that we have a duty to share our common resources. For the Christians supporting the cause of refugees, migrants, and asylum seekers, it is not a hobby. It's not a niche interest. It is an act of justice. With those who flee from their homeland in mind, I conclude with a verse from Isaiah, which describes the manner of the Redeemer in his pursuit of justice. It says of him so beautifully, "He does not break the crushed reed, nor quench the wavering flame." If someone has fled their homeland, crossed the desert and the sea, or maybe two seas, negotiated countless obstacles, struggled to find food for themselves and their family, and is then detained, denied the right to work, threatened with deportation, is it likely that the flame of hope, which they managed to keep alive, is going to be strengthened or extinguished? To uphold people's dignity, it is essential to give them hope. That is also our duty towards migrants and refugees. Thank you.
Bishop Paul, thank you very much for that input, and what a valuable insight into the document, which has had such a profound impact, I think, in our communities across England and Wales already, and is a great teaching document and a resource for us to use for the future. So thank you very much for your leadership on that issue as well. Thank you. It gives me a great privilege then to turn now to Rome, to Andrea Marchesani, who joins us as the coordinator of the research office of the Migrants and Refugees section at the Vatican Dicastery for promoting integral human development.
Thank you.
Andrea's work incorporates aspects of researching human trafficking and slavery, and in the past he's represented the Holy See through the permanent mission at the United Nations office in Geneva. So he has quite extensive experience and understanding of the global issues facing people on the move. Andrea, you're very welcome to join us here this evening. Thank you for giving up your time. I know you're very busy. And over to you now to discuss the themes, the key themes in Pope Francis' message for this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. You are too kind. It's an honor for me to speak after His Excellency. And unfortunately, the Migrants and Refugees section is, or fortunately, depends, is fully integrated now in the Dicastery. So there is a small section within the research office, and I'm part of that. So I will start now with my presentation, and tell me if you can see it without. If you can see it, can you see it, Patrick? The presentation? Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, we can see it.
Thank you very much. So, presenting the message of His Holiness is not an easy task, in a way that what I mean is that I think the message is quite clear, and there is no need to expand, but I would like to put the attention and the focus on several aspects that are fully grounded in the Catholic social teaching. And I would start saying that this message is completely, entirely devoted to this right, the freedom to choose whether to migrate or to stay, the freedom not to migrate, not to leave the homeland. And I will start quoting, as well as Bishop McAleenan did before, the Leo XIII and other two popes. And so this is not a new thing. This is not a new thing for the Catholic Church. And as already the Bishop, His Excellency, quoted Leo, we are already talking about this 200 years ago. And after that, St. John Paul II and also Benedict XVI devoted in some of their speeches, addresses, and messages the freedom and the right not to migrate, and the freedom to do that if it is not possible to fulfill and to access integral human development. So I will go back to introduce how this message, this theme for the message and for the World Day of Migrants and Refugees was born. And I would like to go back to how the new mission of the Dicastery was, how the new mission, how the new Dicastery structure was shaped in the last months. And so we have the Predicate Evangelium with the preamble 8, presenting the Dicastery, so the reform of the Vatican Curia or the Roman Curia. And so here we have the mission of the Dicastery is not only to support the Holy Father, but also the bishops, broadly understood. So also all the pastoral actors, agents that support the bishops. And the approach of the Dicastery to do that is, the first verb we have is to listen, and after to dialogue, reflect, and to discern, propose, and support. To support and to elaborate effective responses. And when I say listen, we are talking about consultation with bishops, visit ad limina of bishops. So the visit that every, if I'm not wrong, 5 years, the bishop have, and they come to Rome to visit the Pope and the other offices of the Roman Curia, and they present to the Pope and to the offices of the Roman Curia the concerns and the concerns they have in their dioceses, in their dioceses, in their parishes. So the theme of this message was born from how the Pope say in the second paragraph of the message, from widely shared pastoral concern, because we register this concern of the bishop or the bishops worldwide during this consultation, during visit ad limina, and so, also the Pope received the same, of course, received the same information during his meetings and with the bishops. So from these three, from the approach of the Dicastery, we start to work on this theme, following also the theme that the Pope proposed for the World Migrants and Refugee Day. So and to insert this theme in a history, we have in 2017 a campaign from the Italian Bishop Conference that was Free to Live and Free to Stay. That was an initiative to raise awareness to live a life in dignity in one country of origin and to have access to the basic rights. And in last year, the Migrants and Refugees, the former Migrants and Refugees section, we prepare a thematic note that the title was "The Right Not to Have to Immigrate." So this was, we tried to talk about this right, and this thematic note was shared with states and other stakeholders of the international community, with an intention of proposing ideas and suggestions. And so we arrive at this year with the message and the theme of the World Day of Migrants and Refugees, where the Pope started to tell us about how people are forced to flee for several reasons, and already we mentioned this, like climate crisis and disaster, conflicts, dignity violation, economic development, missing, and lack of opportunities. And what His Excellency was saying before about the universal destination of goods, we have inequality between world regions, but also within societies. And so we have a partial or null personal or family fulfillment and access to integral human development, and so a lack of access to the common good in the country of origin of the person. So these people are forced to flee to look for a better life or just survival. So as the Pope said in the message, is not the result of a free decision, and it does the parallel with the Holy Family when they they flee to Egypt to save the life of Christ, of Jesus from Herod. So for what the point is, and this is a very long period work, is to eliminate the root causes and create the condition that St. John Paul II and Pope Benedict told us about in the quotation I showed before. So to reaffirm the right not to migrate, and to do this, we need to create conditions for people to stay. So we have several here, very big things like development, equitable distribution, access to common good, and so the primary causes. And so about the equilibrium narrative, we have also the problem that is really linked to human trafficking and how traffickers can enjoy of this enjoy of a narrative that's not equilibrate and cannot help the people to have a balanced choice and a free choice, because we cannot talk about freedom if there is no information, there is no truth about that. It's like the myth of the Platon. And so another point of the message that follows immediately is the to eliminate the root causes, the primary causes is the responsibility of the country of origin, even if we have several elements we should consider as outside interference, how the Pope call them, or colonialism, and resource is grabbing. So, but definitely the responsibility in the country of origin, and to help people to guarantee that there are the conditions to access common good and integral human development. So, as the Pope also tell us about in the message about the way to do that is the good politics as a service of charity, and there are several things that should be a good starting point in the responsibility of the countries, like the programs for the basic rights, so proper housing, decent paid work, adequate food, clean water, and also a more general concept where these basic rights can lie in, like religious freedom, work, health, education, and welfare. So the Pope also speak about a right not codify, so this is right to choose. And as Father Fabio Baggio, the Undersecretary of this Dicastery, was said in the press conference presenting the team, so the right to remain is for sure prior, deeper, and broader than the right to migrate. But this doesn't mean that if there are not those conditions to live in dignity, everyone could and can leave a place. So the right, as I said, the right is this right is understood if there are these conditions. Otherwise, we can the way is open to another life. And so, and this is not, as I said before, only a responsibility of the country of origin, but also shared responsibility on the part of all states, because this the idea is a right internationally codified, not just because of course we are talking about movement along borders and cross border. And also, this is in reference to the universal destination of goods and inequality between not only within society but also between different places and states. So this is also to make clear that is many times we hear that sentence that is let's help that home, but it's not just only that. Is of course is that, but we are also we should also take into account what the Pope told us about the accompaniment of migrants, so the pastoral cares and the welcoming, the four action verb that he gave us at the beginning of the papacy: welcome, protect, promote, and integrate. So this is this right to live in dignity in the country of origin is not possible. On the other side, we had the duty as Catholics to welcome, protect, and promote and integrate. And the Catholic Church should accompany migrants from the country of origin, country of transit, countries of destination, and as the Pope also mentioned in the message, we are also with the possibility of return, as His Excellency was telling us before about the refugees from Ukraine. So, and also to link this to what Leo XIII, that there is no joy in leaving a place you love if there are no other options. So the engagement of the Church, the Pope in the last paragraph of the message speaks about the synodal path and working together as a church, also of the engagement. So this is a commitment to engage with in the country where the church is, to defend and to especially the most vulnerable, and to create the conditions necessary for accessing integral human development without being forced to emigrate. And I will as one of the last thing, I will leave you with the campaign teams of the World Day of Migrants and Refugees, and these are the sub teams, and so are the teams I already talked in the message. So the living as the only alternative, making migration a free choice, international community responsibility, global commitment to peace and security, responsibility of the country of origin, and the point that migration will mark this world century. So the approach, the pastoral approach and the accompaniment will be much needed in the future. So, and I will conclude with a video of the Pope for the World Day of Migrants and Refugees. Let me see if I can share with you. Yes.
Seguirán poblando, creciendo todo nuestro estado. Donde quiera que decidamos construir el futuro del país, así en cualquier otro lugar, lo importante es que siempre haya allí una comunidad dispuesta a acoger, proteger, promover e integrar a todos, sin ficción y sin acoger, proteger, promover e integrar.
Estoy aquí a Canadá y yo soy de africana, togolesa, pero yo salí de mi país hace muchos años. Cuando me salió de mi país me fui a México, y cuando yo llegué a México me fui como 7 años allí, pero la vida de ahí no vale bien, y ya nos decidimos de venir aquí a Canadá para una vida mejor para mis hijas. Y cuando nos llegamos a Canadá, no sé dónde vamos a ir, pero Dios nos dejara una organización que se llama PON, nos apoyamos mucho, nos llevara a dar casa, ahí nos vivimos, ahí ellos empezaron con nosotros, y ya de ahí nos empezamos nuestra vida poco a poco, y después nos ayuda a buscar el apartamento, ahí nos vivimos, nos apoya con un poco de trabajo, de todo lo que yo pueda. Ahorita estamos muy felices con mi pequeña familia aquí. Nos empezamos a trabajar. Yo trabajo como preposé beneficiario, ayuda a la gente, mi esposo también. Mi niña va a escuela, la chiquita a la guardería. Entonces ahora estamos muy felices de nuestra vida. Cuenta ahora con mucha seguridad. Creo que puedo construir un futuro lejos de su casa cuando hay salud, trabajo, documento, escuela.
Y todo dijo que mi esposa permití vivimos en una comunidad latina.
¿Cómo podemos hacer que nuestras comunidades sean cada vez más inclusivas? Les dejo la pregunta.
Andrea, thank you very much for your input and for sharing that video with us as well at the end. Interesting.
Thank you very much. So I leave you with the question of His Holiness also for you, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. Thanks very much for your input and sharing your insights with us on Pope Francis' teaching. Thank you for your time and for giving up your evening as well for us. Thank you very much. We turn now to our colleague Christine Allen, who is the director of CAFOD, the Catholic International Development Charity, and the official aid agency of the Catholic Church in England and Wales. CAFOD work with some of the most hard-to-reach communities across the world, helping the poorest and most marginalised. And as Christine will, I'm sure, tell us in a few moments, CAFOD have projects across the continents of Asia, Africa, South America, and the Middle East. Before rejoining CAFOD, Christine had previously worked as Executive Director for Progressio and Director of Public and Policy Affairs at Christian Aid. Christine's work and that of a broader team is obviously focused on how people can be supported as they flourish in their own homeland. Some of the themes that are consistent there with what Andrea was saying. So, Christine, it's an absolute pleasure for you to join us this evening. Thank you very much for giving up your time, and welcome to you. Christine, I think we've just lost audio of yours there.
You're right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, everybody. You've got me back. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you. And I want to say right from the very beginning that CAFOD very much supports the Love the Stranger document and all the framework that's in it. And as others have said, that this church teaching isn't new. When I joined CAFOD just a few years ago, it was part of the Caritas family campaign, was on just this theme, that share the journey, which I'm sure many of you will remember. So we're all very familiar with the coverage, and certainly in the UK, the coverage of migrants and refugees and the toxic environment in which this coverage takes place. And part of that is how little attention is given to the situations that people have left behind. They're often portrayed as, you know, fleeing, needing homes, or coming here for a better life. And all of those things are true, but our faith and all of our principles cause us to look beyond that sort of portrayal and to remember. I don't know about you, but I hear a lot of discussions where the word migrants are used, or boats, or fleeing, all that kind of invasion, all that kind of very toxic language. We are reminded by Pope Francis, and indeed by the Love the Stranger document, that they're people. They're not just migrants and refugees, they're people, they're our brothers and sisters, and they have a right to live life to its full, no matter where they are. And I think, as Bishop Paul has shared, the bishop's statement is very powerful on that. And CAFOD also shares that belief. It's that desire, that right to flourish, is what drives our work here at CAFOD, as we work with a range of partners of all faiths and none, in responding to need and helping people to live sustainable lives. And part of the issue of that is that we can only really help people to flourish if we're familiar with the context and the perspectives of where they are, or why they might be where they are. So I'm going to share with you, I think, a little bit more on why people might become migrants or refugees, and then I'll share a little bit on the ways in which CAFOD works to help people and communities flourish. Last year hit a new high in terms of the numbers of people forcibly displaced worldwide by persecution, conflict, violence, and human rights violations. We hit globally more than 100 million people. 100 million people. That's a 15th year in a row in which that number has risen. And obviously, the war in Ukraine had a very big impact on that. It had been 89 million people in 2021. But that's the scale that we are talking about. And I think it's also important in the UK context to not forget that the vast majority of people who are forced to flee simply cross a border into neighbouring countries, many of whom are poor, or they're displaced within their own country. They don't all rock up on beaches in Dover, contrary to what some of our politicians would have you believe here. And I think the reasons behind this 15-year set of increase are no mystery. Our world is increasing in environmental, economic and political turmoil. We're seeing poverty increase. We're seeing conflict and climate change, who are all key drivers of migration. And as Bishop Paul flagged, for the vast majority of people, the decision to migrate is not just in search of a better life. It's a matter of life and death. People are fleeing persecution, poverty, conflict, etc. And the other issue that I wanted to reflect on is the fact that we often hear of these decisions when a crisis breaks. So the war in Ukraine is a great example. 4 million people moving incredibly quickly. But in many parts of the world, we don't really appreciate how long people remain either displaced for, or how wide and long term the driving causes of migration have been present for. So media attention might be brief, but in our sector, we now measure the average period of displacement in years and indeed decades, not months, as crises become more protracted and more complex. So Ukraine did remind us last year of how people move during a war, but I'd like us to reflect on perhaps the Syrian crisis as an example, a war that is still going on. That the war in Syria did occupy prime time news slots when, barrel bombs were being dropped on particular besieged areas of the country. Yet those bombs were just the most visible manifestation of a wider situation of incredibly pervasive violence against civilians and, of course, a tradition of human rights abuses. People whose homes and land had been destroyed or occupied or built on by powerful factions, just for facing that as the sort of lower level reality. And so it's for this reason that we must recognise that the issues of violence, injustice and persecution that force people to leave their homes reach far beyond the most visible forms of warfare that often occupy the media spotlight. And I think it's really important for us because in many countries, there can be a real lack of sympathy or understanding for refugees. And, we're seeing it in terms of the toxic environment here in the UK about the political pressure comes to forcibly return refugees to their place of origin. So I really welcome the fact that the discussion tonight has been around the right to stay, but also the right to move, because it's about recognizing that this is the forcible nature, it's the enforced nature of people's movement that is so key. So I've talked a bit about conflict being a major driver. Another cause, as we know, of people's movements is environmental factors, whether it be the catastrophic flooding in Pakistan or the DRC or parts of the Sahel. On the other side of the coin, relentless drought and suffering in the Horn of Africa, Madagascar, even Afghanistan. Millions have been displaced in 2022 or last year as a result of environmental disasters. And they have been and continue to be more intense and frequent as a result of climate change. All of this, and particularly climate change, make the production of food very difficult. And we were seeing in a global economic crisis, inflation and the rising costs of food, fuel and fertilizer adding to people's hardship. And it's also stretching the humanitarian response. Last year, the number of people assessed to be in need of humanitarian assistance grew by a third to an estimated 406 million people. At the time when, although funding is going up, it's being increasingly stretched, and many of the UN crises are poorly funded, just over half in many instances. So we're seeing increasingly new and worsening crises and complex protracted crises being the norm. And with 3/4 of people in need facing at least 2 risk dimensions, as they're called, of conflict, climate and socioeconomic vulnerability. So it's no wonder that migration is increasing. And it's in this context, therefore, that CAFOD works with local organisations, people and communities to respond to the greatest need. And through our strategy, our common home, inspired by Laudato Si and Catholic social teaching in its broadest sense, we recognise that in order to flourish, we must work together to address these interrelated risk dimensions, particularly hearing the cry of the poor and hearing the cry of the earth, that cause people to leave their homelands. And this approach is shared, as I say, across the global Caritas family. More than 160 countries, there's a Caritas agency, or at least one, often a number of them, for diocesan-based. And they're people who are on the front line, providing immediate need, helping and supporting people. And I want to just take a moment to reflect that just yesterday morning, we got news that the warehouse run by Caritas Spes in Ukraine had been bombed and subsequently destroyed. 300 tons of humanitarian aid up in flames. And it was, as one of our partners who's been over said, he felt that it was a targeted attack, not just a rogue drone. Aside, I mean, talk about Ukraine for a while, but I want to talk about some of our work in other parts of the world by way of illustration of the kind of support that CAFOD offers to partners and local communities. In Zambia, for instance, the local church with the Caritas community has been integral to supporting communities facing the impacts of climate change, rising healthcare and food costs. There's a dependence on maize as a staple crop in Zambia, which is very much reliant on inputs from the government, which has led to decreases in crop variety. It's led to lowering of household nutrition. And it's also damaged soils because maize is an incredibly water-intensive crop. So CAFOD, working with the local church and Caritas in the area, has been working to develop alternative approaches to agriculture, including natural fertilizers, crop varieties, and reforesting areas. We've seen villagers and families gain better nutrition, children going to school and achieving an income at different times of the year due to resilient crops. They're just one example of ways in which, through different agricultural techniques, people can flourish in their homeland. Another aspect is that many people are displaced every year by state or private projects that are harmful to the environment. About 15 million people, in fact. In Brazil, the construction of a dam, the Belo Monte Dam, brought about irreversible consequences for the environment and forced indigenous people to move from the homes that they'd flourished in. Supporting with the work, being able to support Caritas Brazil, we mobilized to support the rights of indigenous people who were forced to move following the expansion of the project. There's also other measures of economic sustainability. One example is in Bangladesh. Our partner of Ibashi Kami Unayan program, or OKUP, support people who've been trafficked. And their work is to support reintegration, basic counselling, life skills training, and medical treatment. And they're also highly connected in with Caritas Bangladesh, another one of our partner organisations, who help with self-employment. So one person who's been through this, she received some seed funding, which she used to purchase a cow, which enabled her to become self-sufficient. And she then went on to Caritas Bangladesh to do skills training and development, and was able to, again, refind her life and reintegrate her life in Bangladesh, despite having been trafficked. For us, it's also about helping those who are living and settling in host communities to flourish. And this is particularly challenging in countries like Lebanon, for instance, where there's a very big refugee population. It's about 25% of Lebanon's population are refugees, largely from Syria, but not only. In Lebanon, we've supported a national NGO, which in itself is partly managed by Syrian refugees, which has piloted new approaches in food production in urban settings. It's called vertical farming. And the object of the project is to support individuals in both the Lebanese host community and within the Syrian refugee community. They establish micro gardens. We provide them with quality seeds and other technical inputs, and they're then connected to retail chains, and through what they produce, they meet their household needs and grow an income. More importantly, is this project brings the two communities together, the Syrian refugees and the Lebanese communities together. And, you know, given the pressures that Lebanon is going through in terms of the political crises and pretty much the economic collapse of the country, is really important to avoid fraction and conflict. I could go on. Kenya, South Sudan, Myanmar, Afghanistan. The work that CAFOD does is fundamentally about helping people to flourish in their homes, to try and address the forces that make people flee. And the reality is, as others have said, organisations like CAFOD and the hundreds of Caritas organisations around the world are working to try to provide the basics, but also to advocate and influence too. We collectively fight to ensure that our brothers and sisters can flourish, but also that their voices can be heard. Our advocacy has to be about seeking more ambitious action by governments to end and to resolve conflicts, to address the root causes of conflict, but also to address the harmful government practice and private sector practices that are driving things like the climate emergency, and to tackle the poverty that exists in their own countries. Agencies like CAFOD and others do what we can to help local organisations not just assist and protect people as refugees, but also help them to take on board the importance of their own voice, as UKUP does in Bangladesh, to work with government and to influence governments to address the root causes of displacement and to help people flourish at home. It's been flagged in the chat that a lot of this boils down to a list of commitments that have already been made by our world leaders. They're called the Sustainable Development Goals. They're commitments that really neatly are summed up in the strapline, leave no one behind. But sadly, our world leaders seem to be leaving those promises behind. It's even apt, the fact that the UN General Assembly is meeting this week to, frankly, collectively hang its head in shame at its lack of progress. So I'm very pleased to have an opportunity to talk to you about CAFOD's work and how it helps contribute to not just building a better world, but hopefully taking away some of those pressures that force people to flee their homes. But there is a right to flee too. And for us in the UK, in the environment, the hostile environment that we work in, it's really important to recognise that when you next see a report or hear something on the news about migrants, don't think about that word. Think of them as people. Remember their stories, remember their realities, and that they are our brothers and sisters, and that we do stand with them in prayer and solidarity and do what we can so that they can flourish wherever they are. Thank you.
Christine, thanks very much. That was really powerful. Thank you for your experience and sharing with us that global perspective. I think for those of us that work with people who have sought refuge in the UK, it's often very confronting, very challenging when we hear about people who are considered as migrants or asylum seekers and not first as a person. So thank you very much for leading us to that point as well at the end. So thank you. I'm very pleased now to introduce to everyone Raymond Friel, who's the Chief Executive of Caritas Social Action Network, CSAN. Raymond has a distinguished career for over 30 years in education as a teacher, head teacher, CEO of multi-academy trusts, and an author of various influential books. His latest on Catholic social teaching is to be published very soon, so I'm getting a plug in there for you, Raymond, already. Raymond and his team have worked very closely with the team at the Bishops' Conference to translate this teaching document referred to before by Bishop Paul and consistently throughout this evening's webinar into a clear call to action for people to take in their own communities in how they can support people who are seeking refuge and asylum in the UK. Raymond, it's my privilege to introduce you tonight. Thank you very much and welcome.
Patrick, thank you so much for the warm welcome and for chairing this evening's event. Can I just first of all, on behalf of Caritas Social Action Network, just say a huge thank you to our speakers, to Bishop Paul, to Andrea, to Christine. Really powerful and inspiring inputs. So thank you so much. For my part, I just want to reflect on the role of Caritas Social Action Network, which is the sister agency with CAFOD. To the bishops of England and Wales, CAFOD, as we heard so compellingly from Christine, is the international development agency. Caritas Social Action Network is the home agency, if you like, and we're set up differently to CAFOD. We're not one large organization. We're a small team, but a big network. So there's a small team. We're very kindly hosted by Christine and her colleagues in Romero House. And we convene and help to organize a large network of mostly Catholic charities in England and Wales, including most of the dioceses of England and Wales now have a Caritas agency of some kind. So we try and bring together those agencies working on the front line and help to coordinate, animate, and help to contribute to their formation. So it was a great pleasure for us in March of this year, when Love the Stranger was published, to convene a meeting in London to help to publicize, launch, and promote this very powerful teaching document. And we saw in that event, when we heard from Bishop Paul and others, we saw that our role that day was very much to take the rich teaching of Love the Stranger, inspired by the gospel and Catholic social teaching, and to frame a call to action to help the Catholic community, and indeed all people of goodwill, to respond to this teaching. So what can we do? So we put together a call to action. Alia has just put that in the chat for you. Thank you, Alia. So you can see that on our website, the call to action. And the first part of it, to reflect, and I was very struck by when Bishop Paul reminded us that as Catholics, we've been invited anew, really, by Pope Francis to use the methodology of see, judge, act, or as Pope Francis now likes to say, see, discern, act. And that methodology, which did kind of subside somewhat, I think, in the 70s and 80s, perhaps the 90s, is enshrined in magisterial teaching by Pope John the 23rd in his encyclical Mater et Magister. And the first part of that methodology is to see. What do we see? And I think we've heard in different presentations this evening the importance of that. When we see a small boat full of people crossing the channel, what do we see? We have to be aware of what other people see, and the framing of that situation by other people in our society at the moment is contested, and in some cases is very toxic. We do not, in the Catholic tradition, see a threat. We do not see an invasion. We do not see illegal people. We see human beings, as we've heard already, with a name, a story, and a right to seek asylum, a right to the goods of the earth to sustain a truly human life. So the framing of what we see is very important. We have to counter the narrative, the often toxic narrative, which we see in our media especially, and the front pages of our media presenting so much of a narrative of threats. We pray. We sometimes don't talk enough about the need to pray as Christians. In these circumstances, we believe in the power of petition and intercession, but we also believe that prayer changes our hearts and opens our hearts to the needs of the world and the needs of the most vulnerable people in our world. So there's a section in there on prayer. In our call to action, we invite people to speak up. Sometimes the Catholic voice in our communities is somewhat muted. Sometimes we lack the confidence to speak up against injustice, or we just speak up on certain issues and we're very quiet on other issues. Pope Francis calls us to raise a prophetic voice when human dignity is threatened. So we invite people in their local parishes, their local communities, their local organizations to speak up, to engage your politicians, engage your MP. The Illegal Migration Act, which has just been passed, is sometimes regarded now as a fait accompli. It's done. We can't say any more about it. But I think we should keep speaking about it, because when we speak up and speak out, it is also a process of formation. We are trying to tell people and share with people in the Catholic community why this act is not okay, why it is not okay to deny people their right to seek asylum, why it's not okay to remove from people the protection under human trafficking and modern slavery legislation. That is not okay to detain and treat people that way. So we continue the pressure on the legislation, even though it's been passed into law. We continue to engage with our MPs, our local councillors about these issues. Ask them what is their position when it comes to migration, and help in that process. We help to form the conscience of the Catholic grassroots, but also our legislators, and please God, their hearts will be converted more to the dignity of the person. There's a section in the call to action about learning more about the CSAN members. On our website, you'll see in our 54 members, many of them are engaged on the front line of supporting people who are migrants or are seeking asylum. We've heard mention already of the Jesuit Refugee Service, of the St. Vincent de Paul, of our members who work with the victims of modern slavery and trafficking, like the Madai Trust, like St. John of God Hospital Services. In the wider community, there's much work going on in the Santa Marta group, whose president is our own Cardinal Vincent Nichols, who almost 10 years ago now was commissioned by the Pope to lead this international network of churches working with police authorities to try and combat the curse of modern day human trafficking. The Church of England, there's great work going on there in the CLURE initiative, the Arise Foundation, and other networks like Together for Refugees that CSAN is proud to stand with in this great effort. You can volunteer. You can volunteer with CSAN members or local charities and groups, given your time to try and help support those who are in our communities. We're just coming to the end of our hosting a Ukrainian family. We may still be looking for hosts there. Christine mentioned that terrible war on a number of occasions. If you're willing to open up your homes and your hearts to host a family, then please have a look on our website for those opportunities. We can donate our time, as I've mentioned before. We can donate our money to the different organizations that need our help. We can donate our goods to those who are collecting goods, and we can get involved in fundraising ourselves. We can also finally be aware of purchasing power. There is increasing awareness of human trafficking in the supply chains. And if you look at, according to the UK Modern Slavery Act, if you look at the Modern Slavery Statement Register, you will find there a public registry of modern slavery statements. And also looking at the Transparency in Supply Chains platform, you will see there that was launched to assist the UK to monitor compliance with the UK Modern Slavery Act. So we're trying to increase awareness at parish level of the human trafficking, which happens hidden in plain sight in our communities, in the car washes, in the nail bars, or often now increasingly in online and digital criminality, which is even more invisible. So we're trying to increase awareness of that. And as resources become available, we will share them with you. I think that's just what I want to say, really, Patrick. I just wanted to highlight our call to action, and it's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to work with the Bishops' Conference to help promote that powerful document and to put together a call to action to help the Catholic community practically and concretely see what they might do to put their faith into action in response to this very powerful teaching, which is inspired by the Gospel, the words of Pope Francis, and Catholic social teaching. I'll leave it there, Patrick, because I want to make sure that people have a chance to ask questions and engage in some discussion. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Raymond, and I'm really grateful for that input too. We've got very few questions at the moment in the Q&A section, so if you do have any questions, please feel free to post them in there now and we'll put them to the panel. But I'm pleased to have been, there's a question been added by our colleague Ben Gilchrist, who is the director of Caritas Shrewsbury, around how we can use Love the Stranger. And I'm guessing, Ben, you would add to that now the inputs of the different members of the panel this evening on how we can use that document as we prepare as Catholic organisations for the general election and for approaches to that in 2024. If I may turn to Christine, first of all. Christine, I just wondered if you had any responses to Ben there about how we can not just use the document and the call to action, but actually more broadly as a church, speak out in society for ahead of a general election.
Thanks, Patrick. Yes, so general election likely to be has to be next year, and I think it's really important. There's a number of factors here about being informed, and getting active. Traditionally the churches and ideally kind of working together as churches, I think coming together, have hosted hustings and all that kind of stuff over the years. So I think that's a really good opportunity, and I'm sure CSAN will provide some help on those sorts of that sort of advice. CAFOD's been working with the SVP around some picking up some issues connecting the local and the international. But I think that really comes down to making sure that you ask and engaging with your constituent candidates, and really making sure that they're asked and that they're aware of your concerns. I know it's easy to be really perhaps to lose a bit of hope around our political structure at the moment, or political system at the moment. But actually, an election provides an opportunity to re-engage and to make sure that politicians are aware of what the voices and concerns of their constituents are. And as Raymond highlighted, sometimes as a church, we've been well known to have views on certain issues and not on others. But actually, my experience over the years has been that when particularly involved in election work, that people of faith coming together can be a pretty formidable voice. And it's not just because it's a voice, it's also because it's a voice that's rooted in action. There's a lot in the chat about things that people are doing. You have a think about what's going on in your own parish. I know mine's got a food bank. It helps an Afghan refugee family. It helps a Syrian refugee family, part of a whole range of different activities. And so when I speak to, my MP, just as a normal parish person, I'm speaking to him from, he knows what my church is involved in and how active we are. So he knows that there's an authenticity. When I speak to ministers as director of CAFOD, I'm not speaking as a director of a large organization. We're not that we're that large in international development scenes, but I'm speaking as the voice of the Catholic community. And that has a massive impact. So I think that we've got to recognize our power. Paulo Freire had that great statement, didn't he, about when the poor realize their power, only then can it be made real, only then can it be properly realized. And I think there's a real challenge for all of us to realize and make real the influence and power that we have. So, there's going to be lots of resources around, there's lots of potential work. My advice would be, read up, yes, but draw on your own experience. Lots of people on this webinar are actively involved, as you can see. There are lots of opportunities to make some of those opportunities. Contact your MPs, contact candidates. You can get them from the variety of political party websites to organize something locally if you want. And I think just make sure that your voice is heard and you ask the questions. If you don't want to organize a husting, that's fair enough. Someone will knock on your door. So make sure that you use your ability to contact and make your voices heard and ask the question if the worst comes to worst. Often I've heard politicians say to me, oh, well, we don't hear that on the doorstep, or we don't hear, nobody cares about aid, nobody cares about development. And that's what we've got to get over, because they listen and they do know. So Ali has put stuff in the chat as well in terms of find your MP and stuff. But there's lots of resources around. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, but just do it.
Thanks, Christine. Bishop Paul, you've also, I think, already responded a private message here to Ben on this particular thing. I just wondered if there's anything you wanted to add to what Christine said there about how we use Love the Stranger as the general election approaches us.
I absolutely endorse everything Christine said, a very full answer as well. And also, as Raymond spoke about, see, judge, act. It is those things that need to be employed. However, I think I would go a little bit further by saying that even though our politicians often say to us, this is what the British people want, we know the British people want by the green initiatives that are taking place in parishes and on the south coast. And it would seem that the people are very welcoming to migrants and refugees. Therefore, engaging politicians as we come towards the general election, I think what we have to remember, first of all, that it's very well known that Catholics, perhaps in particular, if you want anything done, go to them. They're very good practical support. What we have to do is look for ways in order to turn that into advocacy. Our leaders must be, that is the Catholic leaders in parishes, priests, and the very able lay people in our parishes. They must be able to mobilize this action and present it in the form of questions. And if there is a hustings, as Christine says, a very valid question is, have you been to Wethersfield? Have you been to Napier Barracks? Have you actually ever met a refugee or a migrant or an asylum seeker? They can be asked questions such as, have you visited these places? Or indeed, and many parishes have food banks. Some parishes have what are now pantries, and invite the politician to some of the social activities that are taking place. And we don't want to force anyone to meet the politicians if they don't want to, but I'm sure there are many people from overseas who were very capable and very willing to present their own story. Everything comes down to story in the end. There's a chapter in Fratelli Tutti where Pope Francis speaks about the encounter. And if you expand that into something wider, the encounter is meeting someone, getting to know them, understand them. So I would suggest something very simple. Invite a politician to a parish hustings and say to them, we are going to invite some of those who are here in your eyes illegally. And as I say, there's some very capable people who can just tell their story. Or once again, as I repeated, ask the politician, have they been to any of the places where these young men generally are being housed, like Wethersfield, Napier, and so forth, and listen to their stories. I think we have to make it very real. It is only whenever the politicians appreciate the lives that people have endured in order to come to this country that their eyes will be opened. I've been to a few of these places, and whatever we say about Home Office officials, I've had some contact with them, and those who sit in offices, they give you the answer that you might expect from a Home Office official, but there are Home Office officials who are working in these centres that I've mentioned, and they're very pastoral, and they're very able, and they're very willing to admit to me that they disagree with the politicians. So I think there are all kinds of practical ways to get the message out. First of all, try and get the politician to have a personal experience himself or herself, and also engage the talented, able people in the parishes to advocate.
Bishop Paul, thank you very much for that response. I think that point around encounter and enter into relationship is absolutely fundamental. And we've heard a little bit this evening about the broader toxic culture and language like invasion, and Raymond referred to it earlier on. I listened to the politician who perhaps first introduced that word into our national debate this week, and she explained how she regretted use of that word in her rhetoric. I think that as a Catholic community, we can counter that rhetoric through politeness, through encounter, compassion, and sensitivity. So I think but entering into relationship is absolutely fundamental. So thank you both. Raymond, I don't know if you wanted to add anything there from a domestic point of view in terms of responding to the 2024 preparations for an election.
No, thank you, Patrick. I would maybe just add a few quick points. One is to engage with our own parishioners. I think we can't take for granted that there is one view of this. I think even in Catholic communities, migration issues are contested. in a way that perhaps most people on this call might not assume. I would imagine most people on this call may be of a similar mindset, but there are people who might support positions in legislation that are hostile. So I think there is a almost a conversion of heart, you know, to be undertaken among the Catholic community themselves, that they see the implications of the gospel and Catholic social teaching, and how can you possibly marry Catholic social teaching and current legislation? For me, in conscience, it's impossible. But not everyone takes that view. So I think there's work to be done there. I would also say that it would appear from some of the briefings we've had this week that when it comes to the general election, the predominant topic will be the cost of living and the economy. And we have to be prepared to counter an argument that, look, let's just look after our own. And there's poverty at home, which of course there is. And we can't afford to let anybody else in, because let's just look after the people in this country who are impoverished and living in hardship. And we need to remember that our contribution to receiving of refugees has been paltry. You know, in terms of global, in European terms and global terms, our contribution, the number of refugees and asylum seekers we've received has been absolutely paltry. And the last point I make is that for Catholic agencies to talk to each other, so we understand what each is doing and we can help each other rather than risking being a little bit discordant or being surprised at what other people are doing. It'd be good to coordinate as much as possible. Not always easy, but coordinate as much as we can.
Thanks very much for that, Raymond. Thank you. A further question then from Ben is, how do we grow collaboration in the UK? So perhaps that's a critical point you've just drawn us to there, Raymond, about how do we grow collaboration in the UK and internationally to address all the issues that we've heard about tonight. I wondered, Raymond, if you wanted to start us off and responding to that collaboration point.
Well, yeah, it's where I finished, really. I think it's key that we work together, and if there's a centralizing body that can bring us together, that might be the Bishops' Conference. Not that we all have to line up and say exactly the same thing, but that we can come together and understand where we're coming from. We shouldn't really be that divergent in our views. If we are inspired by the gospel and Catholic social teaching, there shouldn't be a wide spectrum, I would suggest, of views on this topic or many other topics. So I think we need a good host. We need someone to take the initiative to bring us together, to get us around the table, and to share our particular points of view and how we might approach the general election. Because, as has been said before, if we speak with something approaching a united voice, we've got a better chance of being heard and cutting through, as they say, cutting through the noise. And we know that the noise will increase as we approach the election, and we need to be able to be heard. And for some people, as soon as they hear Catholic in any report, it's either a trigger, sadly, or it's a switch off. So we need to remind people of the richness of our faith and our gospel and our tradition, and try and, as far as possible, use our smartness as well, and our expertise, our professionalism in comms to cut through some of the noise that will inevitably be generated.
Thanks, Raymond. I just want to turn to Andrea there's a question there posted by an anonymous attendee who thanks everyone of the panel for the phrase about asking the question. They've asked, how do we balance the narrative of right to stay and right to move in the popular discourse, and where the right to stay could be misused? Is it a sense of not balance, but asserting both equally? Andrea, I wonder if you had any thoughts on that particular question, please.
Not an easy question, I would say, but balance. Balance is the key, and the Catholic Church. I mean, the local churches should work on this. From Rome we gave pastoral orientation ideas, but after it's up to the local churches to engage and to work on this in every country, so we can give support as the Dicastery, as this new communication section to support also the needs for communication. So balancing, it depends. I mean, it's not easy to answer because it depends on the reality of the country, and I cannot put my decision on what are the real if the motivation to live is good. But I can tell you a thing that having a talk with some bishop in another country, they were telling to the Dicastery in a meeting that many young people are leaving because there is this idea of Europe as a paradise on earth, as heaven on earth, where everything is good, because all from Europe we have this perception that that we have many sources of information, we have social networks, internet connection, so we see reality not completely, but we have a good insight of many of what is happening around, and this is not granted in many other places. And so this narrative, this idea, this perception of reality somewhere else is really limited. And there are many, and these bishops were telling us that there are people that want to live without knowing the reality. So the balance is really, it depends where. I don't know if someone else would like to add something, but this is what I think, and I wouldn't have much more.
Thanks, Andrea. That's really helpful. Thank you. I know there's some other questions perhaps in the chat bar that I might not have got to this evening. I spotted one there from Johan. Johan, good evening and welcome. Thank you very much for your question. I think that Christine's picked up and given her email address to actually pick up on that issue with you directly, but it's about how we can convert the hearts of Catholic clergy who actually contribute to forced migration. You cite there an example from people who are seeking asylum from Uganda and Kenya, who've experienced homophobic rhetoric and discrimination there from people within the church, and obviously that's a tragedy that we would all seek to eliminate from our church. So I'm really grateful for you posting that question, and I'm grateful also to Christine for picking that up too. So thanks, Christine, for that. We only have a few minutes left, and we're due to finish at 7:30. So I just wanted to take the opportunity now to thank each of you for your presence here. I hope you found this experience useful, and it will give you inspiration and resources to work across our communities with empathy, understanding, and acting together. I'd particularly like to thank our colleague Alia Zahin, who has been in the background fielding questions and making sure the technology works, but has been instrumental in bringing this evening's work to the forefront of everyone's attention and in organising things. So Alia, thank you very much for all of that. And to Liam Allmark and Jacob Oakes and the team from the Bishops' Conference for all your continuing work and advocacy in the support and welcome for refugees and migrants to the UK. Thank you to you all for your interest and work in compassionate service to the dignity of others. I'm very honoured to be part of the wider church family and Catholic charities who are seeking to advocate, support and provide practical assistance across our communities. And I would like to take the opportunity to celebrate the extraordinary work going on to welcome people in our communities. I don't think we always celebrate that very much, and I think it's also a time to do that. There's an incredibly rich tapestry of professional and volunteer staff, and I think we want to recognise and celebrate with them those people who face the challenges and accompany people who arrive in the UK seeking support, that welcome assistance. I would encourage you to take a look, if you've not already, to look at your local Caritas agency, or in particular, some of the resources put together by Caritas Westminster and the Jesuit Refugee Service UK, who have prepared materials for World Day of Migrants and Refugees, and they're available on both of their websites. In closing, I'd like us to remember that World Day of Migrants and Refugees is not just an event, but it is also a call to action, and a reminder that our faith, our humanity, and our shared responsibility compel us all to extend a hand of solidarity to those in need. Together, as we discuss, reflect and plan for the future, let's ensure that the spirit of this day continues to inspire us long after this webinar concludes. I'd like to turn now to Bishop Paul, who's kindly offered to conclude our webinar with a prayer and blessing. So Bishop Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Patrick. You have thanked all of us, and I, on behalf of everyone present, would like to thank you for sharing this evening. And it's wonderful to be with you all, and thank you to CSAN for arranging this event. And you said, Patrick, something that is so profound, that World Day of Migrants and Refugees is not just a date in the diary, it's a call to action, but it's also an attitude that we must have towards migrants, refugees, asylum seekers, and all displaced persons, so well summed up by those great verbs of Pope Francis: welcome, protect, promote, and integrate. Patrick began this evening with a prayer from World Day of Migrants and Refugees 2023, and I will conclude with a prayer from 2022, also from Pope Francis, whom we have to remember to pray for and to thank for his great inspiration and his unswerving support of all who are poor and need the help of their brothers and sisters. Lord, make us instruments of your justice, so that where there is exclusion, fraternity may flourish, and where there is greed, a spirit of sharing may grow. Lord, make us builders of your kingdom, together with migrants and refugees, and with all who dwell on the peripheries. Lord, let us learn how beautiful it is to live together as brothers and sisters. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord. And may God's blessing come down upon you and upon all those whom you love, and remain with you all forever. The Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen. Bishop Paul, everybody on the panel, thank you very much. Thank you all for participating.